In this course, we've been speaking about the body from a cellular perspective, pretty much. We talked about neurons, we talked about the cell membrane, we spoke about some of the subcellular components, the organelles, the mitochondria, the endoplasmic reticulum, and so on and so forth. But what we have to identify and understand is that the body is really a bigger network of all of these cells coming together. So what we're studying today is how cells group themselves according to like function and like structure to bring about tissues, organs, and organ systems. Right, so if you look at some of the images that are on the slide, if you look at this one on the right, this is the glomerulus of the kidney. And you can see there are two types of cells here. We have the cells of the glomerulus themselves, which have these little foot processes, and then there's the red blood cells of the endothelium. All right, so you can see how those two different cells bring themselves so close together to bring about a unique function, which is filtration of the blood to form urine. Right, and that's what we're going to study today, how like cells group themselves according to function to bring about tissues, organs, and organ systems. All right, so we have quite a few objectives. The first one is to talk about different types of tissues and then their subtypes. Um, So here we have the levels of organization of the body, starting with the cell. And the cell is the basic structural and functional unit of all living things. Okay, so various organisms have cells, not only humans, right? We see cells in plants. And this is basically the smallest unit of function in the body. There are different types of cells, which we've already spoken about again, neurons, talked about epithelial cells, when you look at transport. And so this is the smallest unit that we find in the body. Now cells will come together according to a like function to form a tissue, right? Look at the heart. The heart has cardiac muscle cells coming together to form the organ that pumps blood around. The liver has like liver cells that come together and so on and so forth. The skin, right? When we talk about organs, these tissues come together, right? Two or more types of tissues to form an organ. Again, think about the heart. Not only do we have the cardiac muscle cells that are forming the actual contractile part of the heart, but we have epithelial cells forming the lining of the heart. We have nervous cells or neurons which innervate the heart. And so we have different types of tissues bringing themselves together to form an organ. And then systems are several groups of organs working together to bring about a related function. So not necessarily the same function, but functions that work hand in hand with each other. Think about the gastrointestinal system, right? You have the mouth, the tongue, the teeth, the esophagus, the liver, the pancreas, right? All these different types of organs, the colon, coming together to carry out related function, which is the breakdown, digestion, and expulsion of waste. So that's your organ system. And then finally, organisms are basically different systems working together. This is how we have the human body or the human organism. We have the nervous system, the gastrointestinal system, the reproductive system, so on and so forth, working together in coordination. So this is how the body is organized from cells right up to entire organisms. And there are different complexities across organisms. So bacteria are much simpler than, say, humans and other mammals. Right? All right, having said that, let's look at the primary tissues of the body. So all tissues in the body are pretty much characterized or categorized into four main types. And we'll talk about each of those and some of the characteristics. But the main tissue that we're going to focus on today is epithelial tissue. So muscle tissue is that contractile tissue. There are three types, which we sort of spoke about already. There's cardiac muscle, which is muscle of your heart, skeletal muscle, that's your voluntary muscle of your limbs, of your face and mouth that you actually can voluntarily move. And then there's smooth muscle. And smooth muscle is pretty much everywhere in the body. It's in the uterus, it's in the bladder, it's in blood vessels, it's in the respiratory tract, and it's not under our voluntary control. Neither is cardiac muscle, but all muscle tissue is pretty much having the same function, contraction for movement. Contraction. The second type of tissue, nervous tissue, we talked about this extensively in the first two parts of the semester. And the main function here is conduction of impulses, right? We talked about the action potential. We talked about innervation, where skeletal muscle or cardiac muscle can be innervated. And this basically is the main function of nervous tissue. These are your neurons and so on. Then there is connective tissue or epithelial tissue, rather. Epithelial tissue, which we're going to talk mostly about today, is the lining surfaces of most of your body. So the external lining, right, which is your skin, is an epithelial tissue. The internal lining of your stomach, of your bladder, is all epithelial tissue. Epithelial tissue also forms your glands, salivary glands. Your liver is a gland, your pancreas. The cells that produce these secretions are essentially epithelial cells, and they come together to form glands. Okay, so those are some of the functions of epithelia. And then finally, connective tissue. I like to think of connective tissue as everything else in the body. Connective tissue actually includes fat, it includes blood, bone, cartilage. That is all under connective tissue. And there's also the dense type of connective tissue, such as tendons, ligaments, and so on. But pretty much everything else in the body is connective tissue. And the function here is to fill spaces, right? So that's some of the job of fat, to fill in the, let's say, the abdominal cavity, as well as storing of energy, another function of fat, and then structural support, which is where we have cartilage, bone, and your ligaments and tendons. They help with structure and support of the body, right? So these are your four types of tissue and some of the main functions that they carry out, but the main one we're focusing on today is epithelia. All right. So as we mentioned earlier, epithelia forms membranes that line the body cavities. Anytime you have a lining inside hollow organs like the stomach, this is where we have epithelia. It also forms external lining like the skin, right? The lining of your mouth. Your GI tract is lined by epithelia. And then the third structure that we looked at formed by epithelia were your glands, right? So salivary glands, pancreas, and all the glands of the body are formed by epithelia. Now the membranes are classified based upon the layers, right? So the layers, as well as the shape of the cells at the base, at the apicalmost layer. So there's simple epithelium versus stratified, and simple means that there's one layer of cells versus stratified where there's more than one layer of cells. And then we also classify epithelia based upon the shape of the cell, and if it's a flat cell, we say it's a squamous tissue. If it's a cuboidal cell, right? Or sorry, if it's a square cell, we say it's a cuboidal tissue. And then if the cells are really tall, we say that this is columnar. Okay, so basically you put those two names together, and that's